Yesterday, I posted the following tweet on Twitter. I don't know what X is, but I was on Twitter. And I said, if you are a layperson, you lack the requisite background knowledge to, quote, do your own research regarding the efficacy of vaccines. That's why we have experts in life to give us informed and trusted opinion when we ourselves lack the ability to make our own informed judgments. This was one of the replies that I received. This individual says, that's interesting. Did you know most philosophers were atheists? So the argument here that, quote, poor arm seems to be making is that if we defer to experts in their expertise in forming our own opinions, then we ought to defer to philosophers as regards the existence of God, because presumably philosophers are experts on the existence of God. This is flawed reasoning. But first of all, let's look at the evidence for, in fact, this claim that most atheists or most philosophers are atheists. I agree. This was established by David Chalmers in a 2009 survey. And 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, he and David Burgett did a follow-up survey in 2020. So they were surveying 1,785 English-speaking philosophers from around the world. So we're talking here about English-speaking philosophers, not philosophers simpliciter. Having said that, the majority do identify as atheist or leaning atheist. Here was the actual breakdown. So almost 19% accepted theism or leaned toward theism, but almost 67% accepted or leaned toward atheism. So two-thirds lean toward atheism. Does that provide a grounds to then defer to atheism because the philosophers are the experts here? Unfortunately, this is in fact a deeply flawed understanding of philosophy. It is perhaps understandable that the layperson is going to think that a philosopher is just someone who has informed opinions in all these different fields, but it's just not like that. Here's the Wikipedia article on outline of philosophy. This is a good, helpful overview. It's not perfect, but it's certainly useful for our purposes. So we begin with aesthetics, and then they break it down into epistemology and different fields of epistemology, and then ethics and a whole range of fields within ethics. So, for example, you could be a specialist in some aspect of applied ethics, such as arguments for abortion and other bioethical in utero topics. That's your specialty, but you may know very little about environmental ethics or metaethics. You can move on to logic and the various different fields here of logic, metaphysics, different fields of metaphysics, and then all of these other fields. So look here, for example, here we have philosophy of religion. So you could be a specialist in philosophy of religion, or you could be specialist in philosophy of law, or a specialist in the philosophy of geography. The fact that you would be a specialist in one of these areas doesn't mean that you thereby have informed opinions on the philosophy of religion. If you studied philosophy of geography as your career and that's your expertise, you may have very limited understanding in the philosophy of religion and thereby arguments for and against God's existence, with the grounds to believe or not believe in God's existence. This has significant implications. What it means is that your belief or disbelief in God may have been fixed at the very outset, and your only exposure to the academic discourse of arguments for and against God's existence may have occurred in an introductory survey to philosophy course 10, 15 years ago when you began your education. And after taking that survey course with a unit in philosophy of religion, you've never looked at philosophy of religion again. So that your opinions now about the non existence of God are formed based upon an introductory survey on the cosmological and teleological and moral arguments for God's existence and the problem of evil. And that's it. that does not make you an informed expert on the philosophy of religion. And thus, the fact that you count yourselves among the 66.9% of philosophers who identify as or lean atheist doesn't give the general population any greater knowledge as to what one should believe about this issue because it doesn't follow that you're informed on it. So you could say it would be much more relevant to survey the opinions of people who are experts in the philosophy of religion as to what they believe. Having said that, there is a caveat there. Of course, people are going to self select. So if people are skeptics or dismissive of or contemptuous of philosophy of religion and arguments for God's existence and stuff, they're not going to spend and devote any time to studying it. But if they consider it seriously, uh, such that they are going to become experts in it, they are going to self select, and thus you'll get a disproportionate number of theists who are working in philosophy of religion. Not surprising. So I don't think that you can survey the views of philosophers of religion on the existence of God and get an accurate reading of the relative strength or weakness of those arguments, although it certainly would be better data than surveying the entire field of philosophy, including, what a philosopher of geography or a philosopher of aesthetics or a philosopher of language happens to believe about those issues. The risk of beating a dead horse, I want to hammer the point home with an analogy with science. Just because you are a quote unquote scientist doesn't believe you automatically have informed opinions on all fields of science. So you might be an archaeologist like this lady, but just because she is an archaeologist doesn't mean she has informed opinions on the nature of human-induced climate change or the efficacy of a new Moderna vaccine. Her expertise is in archaeology. It's not in these other fields. It's not virology. It's not meteorology. It's archaeology. By the same token, the fact that you may be an expert in philosophy of language or of geography or of aesthetics or of law does not mean that you have informed opinions on philosophy of religion. So, to conclude, you may be a very intelligent person. It doesn't mean we should defer to your atheism. And thus, to conclude, the fact that 66.9% of philosophers are atheists or lean atheist doesn't tell you anything about whether you ought to lean or be an atheist.